Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. On this episode, we're going to take a look at a brand new game that just came out here from World at War magazine, issue number 61, The Peaks of the Caucasus. A game designed by Joe Miranda. Yes, Joe Miranda is indeed the designer of this East Front game. And of course, as soon as I saw East Front, I had to pick it up because I am an East Front aficionado, as you all know. So this game basically is what it says it is. This is after the initial onslaught here of Case Blue, which was unleashed on the 28th of June, 1942. And this is the drive for the oil fields of the Caucasus. Found at different locations. My Cop here. You also have oil fields down at Grozny, Telifas, and Baku down there. Okay, and of course, everybody's well-known city of Stalingrad. So basically this game, it is a two-player game, but it is very solo-friendly because it is a chit pool system, which, as I mentioned before, when it comes to games, chit pool is one of my favorite mechanics because of the ease with which you can go ahead and play it solo, because you can take risks and you don't know what's going to get pulled next and all that kind of stuff. It's a little different system than a normal chit pool. We'll get into that here as we go. The game is interesting. I've enjoyed my first couple plays of it. This is my third playthrough of it. And the game also comes in two forms here. If we look here down at the turn record chart here on the German side, we can see that normally it lasts 7 turns, but you can also extend it out to the time of the backhand blow. Von Manstein's effort to recapture Kharkov in the spring of 1943. So, let's just go ahead as always, and we'll dive right in, and we'll go through the system as we play. So the first thing you do every single turn is the command phase. Now, both sides have their own container of command chits that can be picked. And as you can see here, this is the German one, a Stalingrad Sector 1. The map is divided into 2 different sectors. And let me show you the line, simply because I wish the line was better. You'll see what I mean here in a second. So as we zoom in here to where the action is, see this dashed line right here next to the German truck unit there, and also there's some Hungarians and Romanians that are there, but this dashed line here is where the dividing line is. There you can see right there it says Stalingrad and Caucasus sectors. Now most of the time in the game you can only activate one of them, although there's a few markers that allow you to do other activations as well, or you have to do other activations as well. So the command markers are the first thing that go into it, and you can get some that can be brought in later on. Some of them are temporary, some of them are permanent. They're always hanging around, and there are some that's a one-time use. Once they're used, you go ahead and you remove them from the game. The second thing you do each turn is the refit phase. So the refit phase is pretty simple. With the refit phase, you do exactly what it says. You can spend points to refit. Each side has on their own turn record chart how many refit points you get per turn. So we'll go ahead and we'll add those up here in a second, and then I'll show you how we spend them. So the Germans have 3 points, and they actually begin the game with 2, so they actually end up with 5, and the Russians get 3 refit points to start the game, which they are going to need. Now, from the perspective of a solitaire player, what I have to do here always with the refit points is I roll dice, and low roll has to go first. So this time, it is the Soviets who have to refit their people first. Now, refit is pretty straightforward. Let me show you, here I'll zoom in on, one thing I like too is actually this game, the charts are very well organized. I mean, it is a little tough playing solo because the Soviet charts are kind of upside down, but they're pretty easy to read and it's not a big deal. So as you can see here, we got a refit chart. This is how we can spend our points. There's the Germans refit scale there. We could do things like build people back up to full strength, 1 or 2 points. 1 point if they're not in enemy zone of control, 2 points if they are. Replace an eliminated unit completely, but a little twist here. When you do that, you also have to roll on the refit table to see how many turns later they come in, or it is possible to epically fail. So you spent your time trying to refit these guys, and you haven't got the equipment you need, you don't have the replacements you need, so you can't do it. Okay, you can select a special support unit as well. Those are markers that can be used to augment. If you've played any of the Turning the Tables games, like von Manstein's Backhand Blow, they're like the tactical markers in that game. They give you a little extra advantage in your battles. And then there's ones here specifically for the Axis about a Kampfgruppe, which is an optional rule, and then building a truck column, which has to deal with supply. So the Soviets are going to go first. And let's take a look at their situation here. Now, units that have a yellow stripe showing are units that are reduced. And at the beginning of the game, when you set up, after you deploy the Soviet units, you roll a die for each sector, and whatever number comes up, that's how many Soviet units in that sector have to be reduced, reflecting the initial losses from Case Blue, and of course also from the failed offensive at Kharkov in May of 1942, where the Soviets basically attacked straight into the teeth of the German buildup and got completely butchered, which, by the way, is also a game that's part of the Turning the Table system, if you like that sort of thing. That system had 4 games altogether. I tried 3 of the 4, and I enjoy them a lot, but that's kind of a digression, I guess, there. So anyway, so we've got these Soviet units, and for this game, I rolled a 1 for the Stalingrad sector, but I rolled a 6 for the Caucasus sector. So that's a lot of reduced units right out the bat. Okay. Now again, if they're in an enemy zone of control, it will cost 2 replacement points, otherwise 1. So since the Caucasus situation is kind of tenuous, I'm going to spend the 3 Soviet replacement points, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to flip these guys. Now to get replacements, you have to be in supply. Supply in this game is different for each side. For the Soviets, you just have to be within 2 hexes of a railroad that connects to a supply source. Here's a supply source, here's a supply source at Astrakhan, and Urbach is the other place there. So these guys clearly do. Okay, so I'm going to flip these 3 with the 3 replacement points and get them ready to deal with the onslaught there in the Caucasus. Now for the Germans, I have 5 points. And I've got 2 German units that are reduced. Now, because of the way the Soviet deployment ended up being, what I ended up doing for this game is I ended up putting a heavy emphasis on the Caucasus. The reason, of course, is the losses that the Soviets sustained here in the initial setup. In the game, the Germans have units that are for the Stalingrad sector, units that are for the Caucasus sector, Army Group B and A, and then you also have ones that can go either way. And I put most of those ones that can go either way, including the bulk of the panzers, down here. Because basically, I'm going to try and get across the Don here, and then try to race, pick up this oil center and these ones here too. Because there are rules in the game where there are German units that can move in and try to repair the damaged oil fields and get them working for the Wehrmacht. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip these 2 reduced units, okay? And for the Germans, it's basically a case of tracing to a supply unit, one like this, that's mobile, and they can follow the railroad tracks. Basically, you want to keep them on the rails. Or there are these truck supply units too. The truck supply units are a little more temporary. Once you use them, they have to go into the eliminated pile, and then you can bring them back with refit points. So that was 2 points worth there. Now I could go ahead and get a special support unit, or I could save my replacement points. You may save them from turn to turn. The Germans can save up to 5, the Soviets can save up to 9 on a given situation here. So what I think I'll do, I think I will draw one. So let me go ahead over here to support unit cup. And shake it up, as the cars would say. Shake it up. And let's see what I drew. Okay, so I drew this air unit here. Okay, now the good news and bad news about this air unit is that this is one that I can only use on the German side of the front line. So that's a little disappointing. It's more of a defensive kind of thing as opposed to an offensive one. So Yeah, that's a bummer, man. The good news is that air units, when placed, not only affect the hex they're in, but the 6 hexes surrounding them if they are at full strength. So I still might be able to go ahead and use that this turn. Okay, so I'm going to save my other 2 points though for the future, because of course one thing the Germans have trouble with is keeping up with replacements, which of course the Russians did not have that much trouble with. Okay, so we've done the refit phase. Now we're on to the operation phase. Now at the beginning of the game, from October, or from July until through October, the Germans have the initiative, so they'll get to pull their command marker first each turn. After that, in November, the Soviets get the upper hand until the end of the scenario, which is either January or March, depending on that. I don't think it switches on that extended one. I haven't played the extended one yet, so I'll kind of put a little caveat there, an asterisk, just in case, double check that on the rule book here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shake up the German cup and see what I can pull. And I'm pulling the special Stalingrad one, which gives me a +1 shift to all my attacks in battle. Okay, now when you pull a command marker, you have 2 choices. You can either play it or you can pass. If both players pass consecutively, then the turn is over. And then of course you move on to a very quick return phase, which deals mostly with the air power units, and then you're back on to the next turn. Okay. Now of course, since I'm Germany and I don't really want to waste anything here, I'm going to go ahead and play that, because I don't want to take the risk of the Russians passing, because then we'll be on to the next turn. And of course, as time goes on, time is on their side, to quote the Rolling Stones, and that would be very bad for Germany. So we're going to go ahead and unleash this operation here, which now means I can basically move all units above the Stalingrad dividing line here. Okay. Now, I can move them into the Caucasus line, but any units that move cannot attack that turn. They would have to wait until the Caucasus front activates. So keep that in mind if you're crossing boundary lines here. Now again, because of the way things played out here, and of course the original concept of Case Blue was basically to capture Stalingrad quickly if possible. Otherwise to pretty much just mask the city and then rapidly advance into the Caucasus Mountains and go after the oil, which is basically what I'm going to do here, the original intention with this. So drawing this first, I mean, I could have put it back in and passed, but again, you know, if I'm the Soviet player, quite frankly, putting on my Soviet hat, hey, I'm going to go ahead and say, fine, let's pass. And the more time goes by, better it is for me. Okay, so after you go ahead and you pull your chit, then you have a reinforcement segment. Well, the Germans have no reinforcements here to begin. And then you have your airstrike segment. You can deploy airstrikes onto the map. And to do that, it's pretty simple. You just pretty much take it like this Axis air unit here, the Axis Ally air unit, and you just put it on any hex that you want on the map. So what I'm going to do is, here at the beginning of the game, I'm going to try and turn this flank to start and see if I can maybe swing this way. I'm going to hold this part of the Stalingrad front and try to swing here with a hinge and see if we can make that work. So I'll put it on this hex here. So now that will influence all battles that are in this hex and also the 6 hexes around it as well. Okay, and the number on it, which you saw was number 1, that is the column shift when it comes to combat. Now, big thing to keep in mind here is that it's for offense and defense. So if you have an enemy attack that hex, that will give you a 1 column shift to the left to help you out. So bear that in mind. So once you place your air units, and if you have your units on the map, like this one I have now, next time I draw the Stalingrad front, I'll be able to move it somewhere else within that area as well. And be careful, because you don't pull them back off the map until the very end. So once you put an air unit onto an area, it's kind of committed to that sector, because you can only activate units whenever the sector chit is pulled. So I'll go ahead and I'll move, because now we're in movement, I'll move this German unit up to here, and I will go ahead and I'll pull these guys out, 1, 2, and bring them over here as well to keep an eye on things. Then I'm going to take this unit here and move it to here. Now by following the railroad, it's only a half movement point to do. So 1, 2, he'll move into here. And of course, like a lot of war games, once you hit the enemy zone of control, you gotta stop. If you're starting an enemy zone of control, you have to leave it before re-entering the same or another one. Big thing here though is you cannot move from enemy zone of control to enemy zone of control, no matter what. So keep that in mind as you're maneuvering your forces. That does have an impact on things. Okay. All right. So that's all the thing I'm going to do here for the Stalingrad front, which I know is kind of wasting the +1, but again, I put most of my eggs in the Caucasus basket, so to speak. So, yeah. Okay. And of course, you can see here there's 2 boxes. Let's zoom in a little bit. You can see over here that we've got the box that's all about the Axis command shit, so it tells you when one's pulled, what it can do. And then we have 2 sets of combat results tables. Yes, they are the percentage tables. I know some people dread those. I mean, it's just fractions times 100. Let's be honest, you know, that's what it amounts to. For the most part. I mean, sometimes it's a little different than that, but it's really what it amounts to. So, you can choose one or the other. Either the mobile one, you must have at least 1 mechanized unit to be able to do that, or you can choose the assault one. And in certain cases, like attacking a city, you must always choose the assault one. So let's take a look over here and see what I got here in this battle. And we'll zoom in on this particular fight way up here on the northern part of the Stalingrad front. So I have 3, and 6 is 9, and 2 is 11, and 3 is 14. And that'll be 14 to 6. So that will start out at the 200% column. Now I have the air unit there, which air unit lets you shift over 1, and then you check your supply 2. Now the Germans need to trace back 3 hexes in summertime to a supply source, which is mostly going to be these units here, unless of course you're right on top of one that's like Kursk here. Okay. Now, notice I trace this way, 1, 2, 3, because you cannot trace through an enemy zone of control. And unlike a lot of other war games, having a friendly unit in a hex does not negate the enemy zone of control. So you really got to be careful with your logistic lines here as you're working your way through the game. Okay. For the Soviets, it's basically tracing to a space and then being able to trace that railroad back. But they're going to have a problem. They can trace to here, but that's an enemy zone of control. You can't do that. So when that happens, that basically gives the attackers another shift to the right. So that'll take us over to the 400% column. Okay? And then, with the Stalingrad special bonus, it'll take us over to the 500% column. So hopefully this major assault here will let me get more troops across the river and get rolling with the Germans. So I rolled a 3. A 3 is DA, Defender Attrition. So Defender Attrition is reduce 1 defending unit, and if all the defending units are eliminated, you can advance. Well, they weren't. They were just reduced. That's it. Okay. So unfortunately, I won't be able to get across the river this time, and of course I didn't end up with a negative river modifier because of these guys here as well. So, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Those guys are sticking out there at Voronezh. But those guys, up, we gotta go back and do this again. My apologies. Okay, let's start this from the top again here. See, this again, this is tricky. The fact that you cannot trace through enemy zone of control. When a friendly unit doesn't negate it, it does make it tricky. Because here's the supply source through here. But this, here's a Soviet unit, here's a Soviet unit. So technically, this guy here is not going to be able to get supply. So I can either leave him out of the attack, or for every unit that is attacking that's not supplied, it's a negative shift on the chart. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and do the attack the way I intended. So again, we have 6 and 3, 9, 11, 14. Okay, so that's again 200% to start. Okay, now let's go ahead and shift for Soviet modifiers. So I have 2 units that are out of supply, so that's going to take it down to the 100% column. But the Soviets themselves are out, 1, and then the air unit's there, so that's actually the 200% column, which that turns that result now into a and 1 more for the Stalingrad special one. So now that turns that into a defender withdraws. So defending units retreat 1 hex, so they can retreat this way, and then attacking units may advance 1 hex into there. And of course, other armored units can pursue further, which you can look up in the rules. Now, if they had to retreat into this hex, that basically, again, even if there's a friendly unit there, it does not negate enemy zone of control. You would have to flip it and lose an additional step if you have to retreat through an enemy zone of control. Okay? So that was kind of tame because, you know, like I said, for this game, I just decided to load up on the Caucasus because of all the losses that took place down there. Okay. And each turn, there is a limit to how many markers you can pull. So for the Axis on turn 1, there's 5. For the Soviets on turn 1, they only get to pull 2. Alright, so we'll keep that in mind as we go through here with this. Alright, so let's see what the Soviets pull. So the Soviets are pulling the Stalingrad sector. Now, again, I could go ahead and, after seeing it, you have the choice of passing and putting it back in the cup. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to play this, and here's the reason why. The first thing you do is reinforcements, and the Russians have a bunch of reinforcements. However, unfortunately for the Russians in this game, reinforcements must be placed in a supply hex or an east edge hex, but it has to be north of the Caspian Sea. So basically that means all these hexes down here along the coast are no good. So if I want to bring these reinforcements in to try and buck up the Caucasus front, which I figure will take a beating here at the beginning, then I need to go ahead and be able to do that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and activate the Stalingrad sector so that I can do that. Now, looking at things here, the Soviets don't have air units at the beginning of the game. When both sides have air units, then you can have battles for air superiority, which can become very significant, because when air units are destroyed, you have to go through the whole refit process and the die roll, and the die roll can be unforgiving, especially those die rolls that basically are epic fails. You didn't manage to get anything rebuilt in time. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and place these reinforcements, because I am going to send some of them down towards the Caucasus front and try to help out down there and keep the Caucasus situation from getting out of hand, because the oil hexes, of course, are worth quite a bit of points victory-wise, as well as being worth refit points if the Germans can get them fixed and online again, as it were. Okay, so let's see now. Well, defensively right now on the Stalingrad front, I'm not really feeling any need to shuffle anything too much. I've got things taken care of with zones of control, because again, the Germans will not be able to move from here to here. You can't move from one enemy zone control to another, so that's a good way to lock things down. The thing I could do, of course, is pull this guy back, put this guy in here for defensive purposes, and try to get him replacement points next time. But he has a movement factor of only 1, so that's going to be a little tricky to do that. But it's probably worth it, because it does take twice as many points to bring a unit back from the eliminated pile. Okay, so let me pull these guys out of line. I'll move these guys in to take their place, and I'll move this armored unit 1 into here to kind of help out with that too. Okay, so again, you know, Soviets at the beginning, you're basically playing the waiting game, the hang in there and hold everything together game. So now these guys, I'll go ahead and move them towards the Caucasus. So they're following the rail line. So 1, and there's a bridge, so a bridge negates any river cost for crossing. So again, 1, 2, and 3. We'll bring them all down to there. Bring these guys, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to bring this armored unit down too. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to have to go a half. Soviet units cannot stack in this game. The Germans can stack up to 2 units in a hex. The Soviets can only have 1 unit per hex. And I'm not going to do any combat on the Stalingrad front. I'm going to sit tight and hang in there. So now it's back to the mighty Wehrmacht making their decision. So let's see what they pull for their command marker. And they pulled the Stalingrad sector. Whoops. Uh-oh. I lost it. Hang on. Let's try that again. They pulled the Stalingrad sector. Okay? Now, again, the problem with the Germans at the beginning of the game is if you pass, the Soviets will be more than happy to pass, and then that ends the turn. You don't want that to happen, so I'm going to have to play this even though I don't want to. Now, the Germans do get to play 5 markers, but there are 6 markers in their cup, so somebody's going to be left out in the cold, so to speak, at the beginning of the game. But I'm not getting anything going on with the Caucasus, and that's the front I put the emphasis on. Alright, so again, I could deploy any air units that I want, or I can redeploy this Axis air unit here. Okay. And I think I'll go ahead and I'll do that. Because, that does make things a little tricky now, given the situation where it is here. Unless I bring this German unit across the river, which I could, but that also could be tricky. Maybe I shouldn't have put such a heavy emphasis on the Caucasus, but I'm just anxious to break through and get down through there. Decisions. You know what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to move this here for defensive purposes, and I'm going to let that sit tight. I know that's probably not the best idea in the world, but again, I'm going to try and mask this and just put my emphasis down into the Caucasus and go after those oil fields. Alright, so the Soviets get to draw next, and they have drawn the Caucasus sector. Now, here's the thing. If the Soviets accept this one, they only get 2 markers on the first turn, so they won't be able to activate it all. But if they don't accept it, then they do run the risk of maybe not drawing a Caucasus marker for a while. But you know what? I'm going to run the risk. I'm going to pass. I'm going to put it back in the cup and say thanks but no thanks. We'll wait. Alright, so now again, the Germans are not going to pass. Not at the beginning. There's no way. We need the good weather. Finally what I've been waiting for. The Caucasus sector. Alright. Okay. So. Now, air units. Yeah, I got lots of air units to deploy. So here we go. I am going to bring the bulk of my air units down to here. I'm going to try and blast my way across the Don. So we're going to put one here, and one here as I activate all of this. Okay. Now, although an air unit can influence the 6 hexes around it so long as it's full strength, it's not on its flip side. It's, the attack value is parenthesized on the flip side. It can influence all the 6 hexes around, but you can only use it for one combat. So you can't have it, support 2 different battles in the same turn. It would have to basically handle its own battle. Hence why I put those 3 in a row down here across the Don River. Okay. Now I'm also going to take a look at potentially using some of my support units this turn too, because I want to be able to basically slam away at the Soviets and get across the Don, this river, if it's at all humanly possible. That is my goal. Okay, so I've placed my air units. Now there's not really a whole lot of movement to do because there's just not a whole lot of movement to do. We're still on the front line. We're still starting the game. I've got everybody in supply. I put these 2 supply depots down here again because I put my emphasis on the Caucasus and trying to drive into that region and get all that oil that I need. So since there really isn't a whole lot of movement to do, we'll go ahead and we'll start to tabulate up here all the combats that are going to happen, these 3, right across the front here as we attack across the Don River. Okay, so here we go. So, first combat, I've got 16 to 6. So 16 to 6, and I can use the mobile one. That should come out to 200%. I don't think it's going to make the 300% column. No, it wouldn't, because 6 times 3 is 18. So it is the 200% column. The only time you really have to mess around with that is like these in-between ones, the 100 and 150 ones, when you get to like 1.5. But after that, it's whole numbers, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600% wise. Okay, so start at 200%. Now, attacking across the Don, and we do have our terrain effects chart up here. It is a major river, and that means it's going to be a -2 on the column shifts. Well, our air unit is there, so that takes us back to +2. And basically, I'm just trying to get across there. Whoops. And that guy is running for his life. Oh, I see why he's running for his life. He came up with 1. Low numbers are bad in this, high numbers are good. So I'm glad he took himself out of the game. Yeah, I don't roll a die after it's rolled itself. I don't. Whether high or low number, it just like used up its roll. So I know that's weird. Whatever. We all have our little quirks. And I rolled a 3. So 3. 3 is a mobile assault. So reduce 1 defending unit. Surviving defending units retreat 1 hex. So that's actually perfect. Now, if you have to retreat into a hex that's overstacked, then you have to keep on retreating until it's over. And so now these German units will advance across the Don. Okay. Now the nice thing here about the air units, especially at the beginning of the game for the Germans, is, like I said, you can use them for attack or defense. So if the Soviets attempt to attack that hex where I just moved, opposite Rostov, the Germans would get a 2-column shift in their favor. So you have to be really, really careful, especially early on as the Soviets. You know, like what happens in a lot of games covering the beginning of the Eastern Front from like 41 to 43, you know, as the Soviets, you gotta do more like a float like a butterfly and eventually prepare to sting like a bee. So that's something you just have to keep in mind here. Okay, so that assault went well. And yeah, I know I'm taking a little bit of a risk attacking with all 3 of these across, but hey, you know, no guts, no glory, right? Fortune favors the brave, all those good things. All right, so this is going to be 14 to 6. Now, that will also give me 200%. And again, the river, the air power, they'll cancel each other out. Everybody's in supply. That's not an issue, so we don't have any column shifts there. So once again, we're on this 200% column. What I could use right now is a big juicy 6. Oh! What do you know? It's a big juicy 6. Overrun. Yes. Okay. Overrun. Reduce all defending units. So we're going to flip this Soviet unit. Bam. Excuse me. Dealing with a cough all day. I think it's allergies irritating my throat. Okay, so overrun. Alright, then surviving Soviet units, defending units rather, retreat 3 hexes. So 1, 2, 3. So they are high-tailing it, man. They are out of here. Okay, and then of course the attacker can do pursuit movement. Mechanized can pursue 1 extra hex. But since there's nowhere to go except across the river, I don't have any pursuit here. So to quote the Big Lebowski, that's a bummer, man. Oh well, I'm across the river. That's the important part. All right, last combat. This is going to be a little tighter. This is going to be 8 to 6. Now let me see if that ends up being what percentage I think it's going to be. I'm pretty sure. I think that will make 1.5. Like I said, I told you before. Nope, it's only 133. Oh, but that column goes, yeah, that column goes 100 to 149. So, and I have to use the assault one because I have no mobile units. So this is going to be a bit of a risk. Again, it would be 2 shifts to the left because of the river, 2 shifts back to the right because of the air unit. So, to quote Maxine Nightingale, we're right back where we started from. So here we go. So again, I'm looking for a high number. Big money, big money. Oh, I got a 5. All right. 5 is DW, Defender withdraws. So they retreat 1 hex, and then of course the attackers can advance 1 hex. All right. So, but again, they will have to, and they'll have to go this way, because remember, you cannot go through an enemy zone of control. I mean, I could flip it, but I'm not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense. And I will bring these German units across. And again, the great thing at the beginning of the game is those air units will help defend and protect those German spearheads as they lunge across and prepare to drive into the Caucasus. So, a very successful opening sequence here for the mighty German Wehrmacht, to quote Captain Kiesler in Cross of Iron. Alright, good war movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Excellent movie. So, that's going to be the end of their activation. There's basically nothing else to really worry about at this point. So, let's draw the Soviet marker. And for the Soviets, I've drawn the Stalingrad sector. And again, as the Soviets, I'm going to pass, because I really want that Caucasus one now. Because the Germans may well be on their way. Bad luck for the German High Command. It's the Stalingrad one. And again, if I pass, the Soviets will pass. I put my Soviet hat on and I go, da, comrades, we will pass. So, I was hoping to get Edelweiss. Edelweiss gives a +1 bonus to any attacks to Army Group A into the Caucasus, but okay. Well, one thing I will do, might be a little risky, but I'll go ahead and I'll play the Stalingrad sector here. Alright, now, the question becomes, I have these armored units here, 2 of them. Should I send them both south to support the Caucasus drive? That would leave me no German armor in the Stalingrad sector. Yikes, 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 yikes. That could be a little tricky, especially come a few months from now. But again, if I get free running here, then I can drive here and swing back behind. And I could go after the Soviet supply sources, and when I cut those supply sources off, they're in deep doo-doo, up on sanitary waters without proper means of propelling themselves forward. I do it. Okay, so I'm going to move these guys. Remember, I can't attack with them, but I can move them. And I will move them across the border. And I will move them into position to cross at Rostov for when I get my Caucasus chit together, so to speak. Alright. And again, I'm not going to reposition anybody. I'm not going to move them around. I'll keep that Axis ally where it is, because I think that's the biggest threat for the Russians to try and recapture Voronezh early on. Okay. Speaking of the Russians, what did they pull this time? Oh, bad luck for the Russians. It's the Stalingrad sector again. Okay, but again, the Germans get 5, so I know the Germans are going to pull at least 1 more, so I will pass as the Russians. Alright, Germany has a 50-50 chance on Edelweiss. The good news is I also get a Caucasus one no matter what, because that's all that's left in there. And as the player, you can always check your cup before you draw. So which one did I get? Well, okay, I did not get the one I was hoping for that gives me the +1 bonus. I got the Caucasus sector. But I need to play it because I got to keep this offensive rolling, and that's my 5th and final marker I get to play here on this turn. So now I can activate the Caucasus front once again. And of course, what I'm going to do is, to quote Aerosmith, train kept it rolling, is what I'm going to basically be doing. Okay, so I will send these air units out to basically strike. And then, of course, I'm hoping to advance, and then they'll be able to help out with protection there. But I won't be able to move anything else just yet. Now, I can move this mobile supply unit to here because it's legal to put it... Well, actually, I'm going to move this one to here. Let me do this over. 1, 2 to there, and then 1, 2 to here. Okay. I can go ahead and move it and stack it with 2 units because it doesn't count towards stacking the mobile supply units down. I'm going to keep that truck over there too, just in case I need to hightail it down and get ready to roll into there. So I got a little bit of a bottleneck right now here, but maybe what I should have done was beefed up these 2 hexes on the Stalingrad front and put more pressure here. That probably would have been a good idea. Oh well. Nope, something to think about for a future game. It's one of the best things about doing this hobby is, you know, if something didn't work the first time, and if it didn't look so good, or you're like, oh shoot, I should have done this, well, guess what? You can go ahead and do it again, to quote Steely Dan. Alright, so, not a whole lot of movement, because again, I'm trying to bust my way through all of this at this point in time, as I try to go ahead and clean this space out to get myself room, so then that way I can start to flood all over the place here. Alright. So, let's see. Now, those guys are full strength. That's unfortunate, because otherwise I would have used one this way and one this way. These guys are full strength. They're all full strength still. That was that second line of defense. That's why I set it up that way for the Soviets as an echelon down there. So, just to show you what I'm talking about here. Give you a better view. There we go. There's all that battle going on down there in the Caucasus. Now, of course, the Russians are running the risk of not drawing a Caucasus marker here for the last one in the turn. Because the Germans, of course, will go ahead and pass, and the Russians only get 2 command markers on the first turn. Everybody has a command limit that is, again, printed on the turn record track. Alright, now here's the dilemma. I can see my battery's getting low. So, should I go ahead and see how much more I can squeeze in here for you guys? Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so here we go. So again, we're in supply. These guys will be in supply because they will be able to trace. German air power does not affect line of communication. It can interdict movement for rail movement, but it cannot do it cannot bother lines of communication. Okay, so we've got 16 to 6. That's 200%. But this time we won't have any drawback on terrain, so that will take us up to the 400% column. Oh, and there goes my battery. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll come back in a turn or two and show you how things are progressing so you can see how the game unfolds as it goes through the turns. So this is Tim Korchnoi from Bare Bones Wargaming. Whoops, that's real close, isn't it? Yes, here we go. Bare Bones Wargaming saying thanks for watching, and I'll come back next episode from the peaks of the Caucasus with any luck as the Germans. Or as the Soviets, I will be denying it to the fascist, imperialist invaders. Alright, thanks for watching. See you next time.